Well, we want to welcome everybody to this program of the University of Arkansas Small Business Technology and Development Center. We are so excited to be able to bring you these educational programs to help support small businesses and you individually. Please be advised that we will be recording the workshop for ASB/TDC education purposes. I'm going to introduce Nikki in just a minute, but go ahead and wave, Nikki. I am Amy Robinson, and my co-host today is Chris. Say hello, Chris. We also have some other ASB/TDC consultants and specialists with us as well, because in addition to being here to support you, we learn as much as you do from these programs. So we're so happy that you're here, and we love learning alongside you. If you're not familiar with the ASB/TDC, it is a one-stop shop for startups and existing small businesses. We are affiliated with the statewide ASB/TDC, as well as a national network of more than 1,000 small business centers. So we have a crew of people behind us helping support us to help support you. Locally, we offer free one-on-one consulting. Yes, I said free one-on-one consulting services and workshops like this one. And we cover the relevant topics for business owners. And if you are not already a client, we encourage you to visit us at sbtdc.uark.edu, and we'll share a little bit more information at the end. So today we are bringing you how to make your product photography pop with Nikki Toth. So if you are in the wrong classroom, go down the hall. I'm sure there's some boring class down the hall that you can go to if this is not the right one.
This is not.
This is not boring. So this is a workshop format. So we really want to welcome you to keep your video on, interact, and ask questions, just as if you were here with us in person. Unlike in person, we will be navigating technology. So you'll notice that you may have been on mute when you arrived, and as a workshop, we encourage questions as we go along. So you have a few options. If you unmute, we will see your little video square light up, and we'll be calling on you. Even if you're off video, that will happen. You can also use the raise hand feature. If you click on participants, you can enable that feature. And we also heavily encourage you using the chat feature. Chris and I will be monitoring that very closely. So at all other times, just keep yourself on mute. But again, be as in-person, personable, and workshopy as you possibly can, because that is Nikki's style. So now we are happy to introduce Nikki. Nikki Toth is a professional photographer for small business, nonprofit organizations, and for families for the past 6 years. Her professional style is to capture the essence of her subjects, and she wants to help you capture the essence of your business every day. So Nikki, I am gonna turn this baby over to you, and let's dig in. I want to give you as much time as possible.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. I'm so excited to be here today. I think this is our third workshop that we've done together this fall, and it's been fantastic. We got to go through some general smartphone photography basics in the first 2 workshops that we did together, and then we got a lot of feedback that people were looking for product photography help specifically. So we put this workshop together, and we're really excited about it today. And then in a few weeks, we're also going to be talking about editing specifically with your smartphone. So if you're interested in that topic, that'll be here at the beginning of December. So we're really excited about that one also. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get started. And I am going to attempt to be as graceful as possible while I'm moving about screens. So I appreciate any grace that you can throw at me on that. But so today we're going to talk about how to make your product photography pop. And the reason why it's important for us to talk about this topic is the first reason is one that we're going to keep a secret. We're not going to tell anybody, any of my coworkers in the photography world. But the main reason is because you really don't need a professional photographer to take quality product photographs for your business. I truly and honestly believe that with a little bit of foundational information and help on techniques and things like that, you can take fantastic product photography for your business. Our market is saturated visually with kind of subpar photography. So it really just takes a little bit of foundational information to really kick your photographs up a notch and break through that saturation. And we all have products to sell. And there's such when we talk about product photography, there's a pretty huge range of what that could mean to people. So today we're going to have to just kind of take a slice of that and focus in on that. And so today, most of our focus is going to be on small product photography, sort of setting up still lifes and that sort of a thing. Although at the end of the conversation, we are going to talk a little bit about real estate photography or photography for large, like installed types of products, where there's a little bit of a different technique involved in that. That's pretty specialized. So we'll spend a few minutes on that also. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about some recommended supplies. And these are simple things that we probably have around the house. When I show you a sample setup, you're going to see how really basic and simple it can be. We're going to talk about some basic terminology. A lot of the things that, that we're going to cover today, we touched on in our previous 2 photography workshops that we did. And so since some of that information kind of goes back and forth with product photography, I'm just going to go through some basic terminology to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as what words we're using. And then we'll look at a really simple setup, like I mentioned. We'll talk about lighting and composition specific to product photography. And then we'll talk about elevating your product photography. I love to refer to a very simple product photograph as sort of a headshot for your product, but we can, using some really fun, creative ways, we can elevate that product photography so it becomes less of a headshot and really more of a storytelling technique for your business. We'll talk about ways to align your product photography with your brand. And then we're going to, I'm really excited about this, we're going to kind of dive in and look at a couple of case studies. For one of them is a local company here in town, Freckleton Farmhouse. She does a fantastic job with her product photography and really nails a lot of the concepts that we're going to talk about today. And then another favorite product photographer that I like to follow is a photographer out of New York, and her Instagram handle is Book Cook Look, which always trips me up. But she's fantastic at flat lays, which is something that we're going to spend some time talking about today. And then, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about some considerations for more specialized product photography. And then we'll end with a little brief conversation about editing your product photography. So we'll go ahead and get started. So some recommended basic supplies that I think are handy to have when you are shooting your products are, first and foremost, a large white poster board. And this is literally the thing that your kids, you know, did their science projects on. And there's usually a glossy side, and we're going to use the matte side because we want to eliminate any glare on the background of our photographs. So those large white poster boards that you can get at Walmart for 98 cents, grab some of those. We're going to use that for a really simple setup that I'll show you in just a minute as the background. And then once you really get kind of your arms around your product photography and you want to kind of branch out and try some things that are going to add a little bit more interest to your photographs, you'll want to add a variety of other matte non-reflective backgrounds, or what we call sweeps. And so we'll talk about that word in just a minute, but things like wooden planks or cutting boards, pieces of marble or textured tiles, lots of different textured fabric can look fantastic, like velvet and burlap. Even brown paper bags, you can crumple them up or kind of leave them flat. And then it's also handy to have some parchment, because if we're layering our backgrounds, which we'll talk about in a little while, and we have a couple of dark ones, it's nice to have some parchment to add as a brighter layer in between. So those are just some really handy things that you can usually find around the house. If you're interested in something that's a little bit more of a specialized photography backdrop, places like Etsy and Amazon have millions of them. Etsy is probably my favorite source for them because they tend to have prettier ones. They're a little bit more stylish looking. Some things that you'll want to make sure about when you are shopping for backdrops, if you choose to go with a more formal backdrop, is that you want to check the size. So if most of your products are relatively small, then you don't need a giant backdrop that's going to have a backdrop stand. However, if you are making furniture or have larger pieces of products that you're going to be photographing, you're going to want to make sure that you're ordering a backdrop. So they come in different sizes. Make sure you check your size. And the other thing to check is that you're not ordering a digital backdrop. Those are going to be much less expensive. So they may draw your eye to that listing, but those are only digital backdrops, and you don't want those. You want a literal physical backdrop in your hand after you order it. It'll be disappointing if you get a file in the mail and that's in your email and that's what you ordered. And then we want a second poster board or a foam core board to use for bouncing light, which we'll talk about in a little while. So really you can, buy 2 of the simple poster boards like we mentioned. You can fold one of them, which I'll show you in the picture, or you can get more of a foam board that'll stand up on its own. And that'll be really helpful for reducing shadows in your photography. Having a step stool is always handy to be able to really move yourself around as the photographer and change your perspective. A tripod is something that's optional. I don't tend to use a tripod for most anything really, but when you, sometimes they're handy, and you can actually get a little tripod for your phone. So it's just, they usually just have little short legs on them, and sometimes they're extendable, and they usually are sort of sticky, so they kind of stay in place on your table. And if you prefer to have your phone stationary, then you can kind of move your composition around and keep your phone in the same spot, then they can be a handy tool to have. And then you'll want to invest in some sheer curtains or really thin, inexpensive white sheet, or some parchment or tracing paper for diffusing the light. So we're going to talk about the difference between harsh light and diffused light, but sometimes even that diffused light is still pretty strong. And if you're in a position where you can't really move away from the window, then you're going to want something to kind of add a little bit more extra, just cut that light down just a little bit. So, and then clip lights. If you find yourself in a position where the only time that you have to shoot your product photography is in the evening, that's okay. The important thing for that situation is to make sure that you are using more than one light, because you want to try to create as much light as you can. And you want those 2 bulbs or 3 bulbs or however many lamps you're using to have exactly the same light bulb in them, because we want to make sure that we're not mixing light. And what that means is that different light bulbs have a different temperature to them. So one light bulb may look really orangey yellow, and then another light bulb may look really greenish blue. So when you mix those 2 artificial lights together, it can be a disaster. So what you want to try to do is try to get 2 light bulbs that are exactly the same. And then you'll just treat those clip lights just like you would your window light, which again, I'll show you in just a second in the sample setup. Ideally you'll be shooting during the daytime so you can use that lovely natural sunlight. But if you are in a position where night is the only time when you can shoot your products, you can work with artificial light. Just make sure you're keeping it consistent. And then if you do have larger products, you're going to need something like a backdrop stand, which you can order on Amazon. There are millions of them with tons of different features. You probably just need a really simple one because you're not going to be hanging very heavy backdrops on there. And then you're going to want to invest in large pieces of fabric or paper with what are called sweeps, which we'll talk about in just a second also. I use a backdrop stand for some pretty specialized portraits that I do a couple times a year. And I bought a big giant piece of black felt from Joann's or Hobby Lobby or one of those places, because it becomes completely matte in the picture. There's no sheen or anything to the fabric. So that's something that you want to make sure of, is that you don't have any kind of glare or shine coming back from your backdrop. So, so those are our simple recommended supplies.
Nikki, before we launch into some of the next slides, I'm wondering, since we have had a little bit of time and everybody has arrived,
Yes.
I would love to hear from all of you, just putting into the chat what industry you're in.
Oh, yeah.
And just kind of what products, maybe just specifically what products it is that you're looking at shooting. You can add if they're indoor or outdoor or any of those other things, but that would be fantastic if you would just kind of give us a heads up, and we'll just kind of note that and let Nikki know as we go along. I will remind everybody also that if we cannot see your full name first and last, or if you're coming from a telephone or an iPhone shows up or any of those other things, if you would please message Julie Preddy privately and let her know that you're here. We are taking attendance like in a class, so that we can get you this presentation and the video. So be sure to do that if you haven't already, or if your name doesn't show up fully, and let us know what it is that you're taking pictures of so we can have a little context.
Yes, thank you, Amy. I'm glad that you mentioned that. I meant to ask that in the beginning also, because I love to know exactly what you're going to be shooting so that we can talk about that specifically. The more information that I have about what you're looking for, the more equipped I'll be to be able to answer questions that you have, or speak directly to your needs. So some of the basic terms that we're going to use today is we're going to talk about side light. So when we talk about light, we talk about the direction that the light is coming. And when we are shooting our products, we want our products to be lit from the side. So when you set up, you'll see in a second my little simple setup. You will see that the light is coming from the side of my composition. So that is really important, and it's a really simple way to do it. I mean, everybody has a window, or even a doorway or a porch or anything that has light coming in from one direction on the side. And then we'll talk about diffuse light. And so diffuse light is what we always want to look for when we are shooting our products, because that sharp, harsh, direct sunlight that's streaming in through the window is going to create really harsh shadows that are going to be really difficult to remedy, either through editing or through bouncing the light, like we'll talk about in a second. So when we talk about streaming versus diffuse light, you can look at it in your whatever room that you're shooting in. So you can see if there is a hard line on the carpet from where the windowsill is, and that'll tell you that that's direct streaming light. But if it's a soft, not easily drawn out line on the carpet, then that's a more diffuse light that's going to be easier for you to shoot in. And you can always move a little further away from the light if you see that the shadows are a little bit too harsh. Or a little closer to the light if perhaps it's really overcast outside and you're not getting a lot of light. So you have that flexibility, but we do want to always try to avoid, at least when we are starting out with this product photography. We'll see some examples a little bit later of some harsh light that they used creatively, the light and the shadows, to kind of add some interest to the pictures. But I think that when you're starting out, you want to try to stick with that really even soft light that's coming in. So a sweep or a seamless, those are two words that describe the same thing. And those are backgrounds that basically sweep up from the surface of where your products are sitting all the way up to the background, like up to either your backdrop or if it's taped to the wall or taped. I'll show you my example in just a second. It was like a clipboard that I clamped onto my table, and I used that to tape the poster board onto, so that becomes a sweep or a seamless. And the purpose of that is that it eventually looks seamless, or it disappears behind your product. And the reverse, or the opposite of that, would be a right angle background. And so that would literally mean that you would have two backdrops. You would have the one that goes vertically and then one that's horizontally, that creates a right angle that can look then like a kitchen counter, or really anything that you want, any kind of countertop. It creates that countertop look. So that can be something that's really helpful if you are a food photographer, if you are a baker, or want to recreate any sort of indoor countertop situation. You can create that right angle look. And then flat lay. So we use that term to describe any sort of product photography that's shot from the top down. So you will literally lay your products out with all of the props and things that you're using flat on the table, and you will shoot from the top down. So that requires a little bit of a different thought process when you are composing your shot, as opposed to like a composition that's sitting up off the table. So those are just some general terms that we're going to be using throughout the the conversation. So here is that really simple setup, like I told you about. There's nothing fancy going on here. This is literally my school room where my kids are doing virtual school. You can see like things plugged in, and my son's cork board with all of his assignments on it. And so, but then this room, there's really nice diffuse light in the afternoon because it faces east. So the sun in the afternoon is over on the other side of the house, which makes that harsh light that comes in the morning is gone now in the afternoon. And so I get really soft diffuse light. And I literally took one of their little desks and I moved it over to the door. And then, so you'll see my little items there that I was photographing for the workshop. And the poster board that's underneath them is the sweep that we were talking about. So it starts at the tabletop and it goes underneath the products and it sweeps up. And behind there, you see the blue tape. Behind there is a clipboard that's clamped to the table. So it's literally nothing fancy. And then the other poster board is, I think, like an old used poster board. It was all crumbly and like crumpled up in a mess. And I just folded it in half so that it stood up on its own because I was the only one there. I didn't have a helper to hold it for me. That is the benefit over using a poster board that you can fold as opposed to that foam board, because when you have foam board, unless you have a helper, it's just going to fall over. So being able to fold that poster board is just a handy little way to do it. So this is literally the simplest setup that you could do for product photography. This takes that product headshot like we were talking about. So this is sort of the really entry level product photography. This is going to focus completely on your product and nothing else. There's not going to be much storytelling here. This is really to get your product out there. And so we're going to talk a little bit about lighting for product photography. If anybody has any questions, be sure and post those and I will stop for those questions.
So real quick, Nikki, we do have some people coming, letting us know what industry
Okay.
they're in. Fantastic,
Great.
wonderful, thank you all. We do have a lot of items, everything from craft and baking supplies, dog colognes, very interested in that since I have 2 stinky dogs.
Sugar cookies, don't forget sugar cookies.
Yes. Yes,
crafts.
cookies. We've got a couple of unique ones. So a lot of our product photography, a lot are probably along the lines of what you are covering now, that can be done with all of those. A couple of unique ones are glass and metal work, sculpture and fused glass, which obviously can be really tricky with light. Another is someone in healthcare interested in portraits of providers. So I know that you've covered this in some of our past workshops, but maybe looking at that.
And one more that's interesting is the textile, the silk fabric. I think that would be something very different to photograph. So that was interesting.
Great.
Yeah. And also very specifically thinking about e-commerce photography. So I know that you touched on this at the beginning, as far as, social media, standing out in a crowd, making your photographs pop against some of the other things that are going on, but also very specifically for e-commerce.
Great, that's fantastic.
So keep those coming, everybody. Thank you very much.
That's good to know. And the person who posted about being specifically interested in portraits, this is actually really relatable because we are literally taking portraits of these products. And so a lot of the things that we're talking about today will mesh really well with photographing people. The whole idea of using that soft diffuse window light is fantastic for portraits. Oftentimes, rather than using the side light for portraits, we like to face I just lost my train of thought. We want to face our subject directly towards the window and so that creates what's called flat light. It tends to be a little bit more flattering, especially for adults. When we have side light, we can tend to see all of our things that make us ourselves, all of our
humanity.
Our details, yes. Some of those things that we don't necessarily want to see in our pictures. So when we turn instead of having, if the light's where my hand is, instead of having our subject so that the light's hitting them from the side, we want to turn our subject so that their face is hitting the window on a flat perspective. That helps to reduce any sorts of imperfections in their skin. So those are just some like specific portrait tips that kind of have to do with what we're talking about. So That's good to know. So that's great. For lighting for product photography, like I mentioned several times now, we want to make sure that we're using that diffused window or doorway light. Also, and very importantly, we want to turn off all artificial light. We want any lamps, anything that's overhead, all of that needs to get turned off because of that mixed lighting situation. What happens then is we end up with strange yellow highlights in certain places on our products that are not reality. You know, we want our products to look real and look their best. And so when we have mixed lighting, it really can create a problem, and it's really difficult to edit out later. So like I mentioned before, we want to avoid that direct streaming light to avoid hard shadows and to avoid blown out highlights. And what blown out means is that the highlight has become so strong and white that there is no information, digital information left in your file. So you can't even pull the highlights back in editing. They're just done. And it just looks like just bright white nothing. So we want to try to avoid that. So when you find yourself shooting, even with diffuse light, sometimes those highlights can be a little bit bright. So at that point, you just either scoot yourself away from the window a little bit more, or use that curtain or that sheet that we talked about to diffuse the light a little bit more. We're going to position our products so we use window light as side light. I think I've already covered all of this stuff. We're going to use that sheer curtain or that tracing paper to help diffuse the light. And that poster board is really important to help bounce light and soften the shadows. I'm going to show you a before and after example of that in just a second. As I mentioned before, when using lamps, be sure and use exactly the same type of bulb to avoid that mixed light. And then also, this is really important to watch for color casting. Sometimes what we're wearing, because we are really up close and personal to our products that we're shooting, it's important to not wear brightly colored clothing because it can cast a color onto your product. I always recommend wearing a white shirt because then you just become a whole nother reflector. And also watch the walls where you're shooting. Those can do exactly the same thing. If you're in a really brightly colored room, they can cast color right onto your product just like your clothing can. So try, if you can, to be in a neutral environment and then wear that white shirt in order to act as another reflector for your products.
Nikki, you may be about to cover this, and I do see, especially from your pictures here, we do have some people that have some highly reflective products. And obviously, if there's even a jar or any of those other things, highly reflective plastic is being mentioned. And then we did talk about the metal as well. So I just want to reiterate that.
So I think in those situations, my recommendation would be two recommendations. I would have two. One of them is to really work on that diffusing of the light. I think that with reflective products, that's just that's who they are. I mean, that's what they are inherently. So I'm not sure that that it's possible or that it makes like logical sense to try to remove all of the reflection, because I think that it can tend to not look real if if you see like a glass sculpture that doesn't have any reflection on it. I think it would confuse my eyes. But I think that in addition to diffusing the light as much as you can, and then later in editing, brightening it up, that will help to prevent those highlights from getting out of control. And then secondarily, I think that it's important to look and see what is being reflected. So that may take even just more attention to the environment that you're shooting in, because if you're shooting in an environment where there's a lot of kind of messy chaos right off the camera or right off of where you're shooting, that can get reflected and can be really distracting. So I think if you can reduce the chaos or what's showing up in the background or in those reflections, I think that a little bit of reflection makes sense to me. So I hope that answers that question, and maybe I'm not understanding it completely, but I think that in theory, one could, in editing, take out reflections, but I guess it would kind of depend on what the product is and whether that would make sense to the viewer's eyes. If that makes sense? We'll talk about editing a little bit at the end, but the next time we meet, we're going to talk about editing a lot, and we're going to talk about one particular app that I love that's really good at removing things that you don't want. So that could be an answer to that question also. If you find that one of the reflections or glares that's showing up in the object is too distracting or doesn't look right, then you can actually later in editing remove it. But I think a little bit of reflection makes sense for something that's highly reflective, if that makes sense. So hopefully that answers that question.
Well, and of course, if we're not answering your questions or we haven't asked your question yet, feel free to unmute and ahem, good old fashioned ahem, I do have a question, is more than welcome. So please feel free
So,
to.
yeah, I think really diffusing the light, and then I think sometimes you may have to just sort of, play around with it, like try different. It may be that it's an item that you could shoot from the top down and create a different perspective on it, and maybe it needs to, maybe you need to find a different spot in the room that's a little bit further away from the light. I would just kind of play around with it until you find the highlights or reflections that look appropriate and look natural, but don't look distracting or like they're too much. So that would be my recommendation with that.
Angela, I see that you've unmuted. Do you have a question or you'd like to make a comment?
Yes, different screen. I don't know if you can see, but like I've got a bottle here. Can you see?
No, your video's not on.
Sometimes,
right now. Yeah, your video
okay.
isn't on at the moment, but there you are. Hi.
All right, so something like this. So if you're photographing this, sometimes I've been caught in the reflection because it's so reflective. Like you can see me taking the picture.
That would be a situation where the tripod might be helpful because you could put the phone. I'm assuming, are you using a phone or like a DSLR?
I've tried both.
Okay, I would recommend possibly using a tripod because it's going to reduce the amount of person or item or object that's in the reflection, and then also possibly try a different perspective. So instead of shooting straight on or straight from where the reflection is coming from, I'm trying to imagine that bottle sitting like in this situation, and I think it would be similar to the green. I'm pointing at my screen as though you can see where I'm pointing, but the green vase. I mean, I would imagine that bottle that you're holding would probably have a highlight that would go all the way down the side of it. That is similar to where the green highlight shows up. And I think if you are shooting from the front, like where I would have been sitting for this picture, then I think that you could avoid being in the picture in that situation. And if not, then I think that maybe the tripod would be helpful because you can then just sort of sneak your hand in to take the shot and you wouldn't be in it and it would just be your phone, which would be much smaller than your person, if that makes sense. So
yeah. All right.
Another quick question is about if it's better to use white or soft yellow light for nighttime pictures.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you.
White, or if you're taking your pictures at night, would it be better to use white or soft or soft yellow? Is that what the question was?
Yes.
I would always tend towards whatever you think looks the most like sunlight. And I think that daytime sunlight tends to look whiter than it does yellow. I think that when you're shooting with more of a yellow bulb, I think it's going to tend to, you're going to want, when you're editing your pictures later, you're going to feel the need to cool all of them down. So I would always tend towards the most neutral bulb that you can find that's going to mirror the sunlight as much as possible, because the sunlight's going to give you the truest light, and that's going to be the least likely to change the color of your product. So that would always be my recommendation, is to go towards the most neutral white light that you can find. So here are just a couple of examples. The one on the left, as you can see, is with no reflector. So I took that back poster board that's folded, I took that off for this picture. And you can see that compared to the picture with the reflector, how much more defined and heavier those shadows are for that picture on the left. In addition, it just sort of brightens up the whole background also. So it really adds it makes a huge change to have that simple little 98-cent poster board folded right next to your product. So I highly recommend the use of the reflector. And then we'll see the same image, the reflector image at the end, with just a tiny bit of editing. That'll also make a huge difference. Excuse me. So some basic composition. When we're talking about product photography, we generally break it up into either flat lays, which I mentioned before is when your items are laying down on the table or on the floor or wherever you're shooting, and you're shooting from the top down, versus an upright composition. So most of the time your product will tell you what makes the most sense as far as what type of composition to use. Like for Angela's bottles, it probably wouldn't make sense for her to shoot them as a flat lay. Well, I say that, that's actually not true. I think that you could, it would just sort of depend on what your story is that you're wanting to tell. But things that roll like that or that have a lot of body to them tend to just more naturally work in an upright composition. But something like bottles, if you decide to do that, you can use a little bit of salt on the backdrop, and it sort of gives the bottle like a little cushion there, and it keeps it from rolling around. So and then we're going to talk about rule of thirds, which is something, if you were in the other workshop, we talked about a lot. So the rule of thirds basically tells us that our eyes naturally as human beings tend to look at the innermost, let me back up a little bit. If you were to take a tic-tac-toe grid and lay it over the top of your image, our eyes tend to naturally look on either the upright or the horizontal lines, and or that inside square corners. So what we want to do is we want to, one technique, again, the composition rules are really just tools. They're just things that you can use to create a more pleasing to the eye composition. Some of them tend to sound like they sort of compete with each other, but they're really just different ideas that you can try. So the rule of thirds, you would want to place your main subject or the main product that you're selling on one of those four corners of that inside square of the tic-tac-toe grid, if that makes sense. And then another handy composition tool to use is to create triangles out of the objects that are in your composition. So we'll work with groups of 3 where we may have 3 of the same thing to create that repeating unity in the picture, or 3 different things, but that number 3 for some reason is also a really pleasing to the eye composition technique. So we want to use objects and or leading lines to draw our eyes through the image. So we want to consider where we want our viewer's eyes to flow through the image, and we can use items to help guide our viewer through our picture. And like I mentioned before, repeats of objects. We're going to see examples of all of these in just a second, but repeats of objects help to kind of unify the image, and they also can help fill space, because sometimes it can feel really difficult to create these flat lays or these upright compositions. And so repeating your objects can help fill the space and help balance the composition out. But then alternatively, it's nice to have some negative space to allow our eyes to rest and give room if later on we decide to use text or logo in the image. Shooting with the flexibility to be able to crop later on is really, I really recommend that, because then you won't find yourself tied up later feeling like you don't have the room to do with it what you wanted to do. So I highly recommend giving yourself space when you're shooting and then cropping later. And then you can also crop to the different aspect ratios. If you're shooting for Instagram, you may want to have a square aspect ratio, but if you're shooting for Facebook, then you may want it to be, you know, a 3:4 or whatever aspect ratio. And so it's helpful to give yourself space so that later you can creatively crop depending on what your needs are. And then when you're composing flat lays, sometimes it's really helpful to put them on the floor. You know, use a doorway that's open, a door that's open, and use the floor instead of a tabletop, because then you can really give yourself a better perspective, and it just becomes a little bit more practical for rearranging your composition and trying different things than if you were on a table and having to use a step stool to be over the top of it. So
Nikki, one thing just really quick,
yes.
and I covered some of this, but I just wanted to see if you could expand food. So shooting food in general and drink. One of our individuals is kind of struggling trying to find the right angles for that. And I know you did a little bit of this, but could you expand on that just a tad bit more?
Absolutely. Well, I think it also depends on what kind of food we're talking about. But I think that in general, food lends itself to both types of compositions. I think that if you are talking about perhaps a big bakery cupcake or a big bakery muffin or something like that that has a lot of body to it, then I think that in that case, I would probably be more likely to shoot that as an upright composition. However, we could use that concept of repeats where we could have multiple cupcakes or muffins in the image. And we could shoot, we could turn one of them on their side, like cut it open, or there's all sorts of ways that you could create either the flat lay or the upright composition for that type of picture. We're going to talk about some techniques in a few minutes as far as really telling a story with those types of items. And I think food lends itself fantastically to a lot of these techniques, because we're going to talk about really breaking it down into like ingredients and using the ingredients that are in, let's say the example of the muffin, the ingredients that are in that muffin to use as props around the item itself and really create the story behind the image or the product itself. So I think food for me is something that it gets really fun and exciting because it is easy to break it down into parts and pieces to help add depth and layers and that sorts of things to your image. So I think that when we're trying to shoot multiple food items at once, it can feel kind of tricky, like you mentioned, food and drinks. I think that can feel a little bit harder to create a composition that what's the word I'm trying to think of, melds well together. But we're going to see some examples of some flat lays in a little while, where she includes a drink that has a straw coming out of it and then some food items. So I think that when we're talking about different types of products, we can use things like color to really pull them together. Maybe even pulling a color that's similar in the drink and the food into like a kitchen towel or a napkin or something that's also in the image. So we'll talk about using color too, as far as helping to create that unity in the image. So
Nikki, there's one other just to consider in composition while we're still here is how to photograph flat images or flat products. And so if you've asked that question and you want to expand on and maybe give us an example, I'm assuming like books, albums, something along those lines, that might be something that would be flat, that doesn't really have a lot of dimension to it. So I don't know if you want to address that here, if that comes up a little bit later, but just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that flat items, I think that's when your props really come in handy to add that depth, because if you're talking about like the, I forgot what you just mentioned, a poster or an album cover or something like that, that's when the props that you can add to the composition can really help add that depth up off the top of the tabletop, if that makes sense. And then also that flat lay shot, when you're shooting from the top down, in that sort of situation, you don't necessarily want a whole lot of height difference, because then you're not going to see it quite as much. It becomes, well, I mean, you see a little bit, but you don't need a ton of height difference in that situation. So if you were talking about an album cover, you may want to take, depending of course what the picture is that's on the album, but you may want to pull colors from that or a related topic to that album cover that you can bring in as a prop that helps to sort of lift it up off the table, if that makes sense visually. So composition will generally look more plentiful if some of the items are not fully in the frame. So we're going to see some examples of that where our items kind of spill off the edge of the frame. And that's when your editing or your cropping and editing can be really handy, because you can, you can kind of move your cropping square around to create that feeling of abundance and plentifulness. That's not a word, but we're going to go with it anyway. And then once you have your composition set up, shoot for multiple angles and allow room for those different ratios, like we mentioned. When you have all that stuff out, take your time and try flat lays and try those upright compositions and move things around and play around with those triangles and those rules of thirds and things like that to really use. I know it can be hard. It can feel overwhelming to pull things together to create these images. And so when you have all those ideas together, really take advantage of that time. So, so here are some examples that we talked about, the composition examples. So for this, I pulled these pictures from Instagram and I left the username at the top. So in case you want to go check out some more of their work, but here's an example of using the rule of thirds. So if you imagined a tic-tac-toe grid on the top of this image, you would see that it would run right across where these, I believe these are pot holders at the bottom. And then the wooden spoons. Again, I'm pointing at my screen like you can see me where I'm pointing, but so those rule of thirds, and then placing the items towards the bottom third of the image really leaves some space for your eyes to rest at the top. And then this is one of the examples that we're going to look at more in depth, this book Cook Look. And she does beautiful book reviews, and she cooks food that is part of the story. And that's what all of her images are. And so she is fantastic at flat lays. And so I contacted her. I was like, I'm using a ton of your images because you're so great at these flat lays. And so we'll talk a lot about some of her techniques, but here's an example of those triangles. So she used 3 different bowls of food to really, to make it visually appealing with those triangles in that group of 3. And then leading lines. This is a simple photography composition technique where you really literally have things leading your viewer's eyes into what your product is. And then repeats, what we mentioned before, repeats are really handy to create that idea of abundance, but then also to fill space in your image and to act as a unifying source for the image. So the pumpkins, lots of pumpkins there. And then negative space, like we mentioned, it's nice. Everything that's in this image that's for sale is all in the bottom 2/3 or 1/3 of the image. And the rest of the image is white. And so it really allows your eyes a space to rest. And then creating that feeling of abundance, like I mentioned, everything that's in this image is sort of oozing out of the sides. And so we see it's cut off right over the top of all of the ingredients for whatever this oat milk is going to be used for. But it can be a really lovely way to create that feeling of abundance in your image. So now we're going to talk about a little bit about elevating your product photography. Like I mentioned, that simple setup that I showed you, that's really just a headshot for your product. And now we're going to talk about some ways to really elevate your product photography and make it something that's helps tell the story of your company a little bit better. So styling is really any intentional move to improve the way that your product looks and feels to your customer. So we want to use props that contribute to the story of the image. And in these two photographs here, we see, I think that in the upper left photograph, the products are the cheese knife and the cheese board. But of course, she's added layers. So she's got like the linen, the table or the kitchen towel, and then the little wicker placemat, and even the table itself has a lot of texture to it. And then she's added the props that really help tell the story of these products. And then I thought this other one was really fun and seasonally fun and appropriate for right now. But she just really added some fun little props to help tell the story of this. I believe it was a little workshop that she was putting together. So really think through what your product is and try to break it down into, it could be ingredients, or it could be the tools or the supplies that you used to create whatever it is that you're selling. Or if it was we mentioned the dog cologne idea, that you can take what the scent is and really break that down and try to find props that help tell the story of what that scent is. So while it might not feel quite as obvious when you're talking about something like cologne, I think that when you have cologne that's coconut lime flavored, you can really break open a coconut and really have the cut open limes and that sort of a thing to help tell the story of what that cologne is. So And then adding a sense of place and movement. So this takes us away from our sweep and our seamless, and this puts us back into reality, but it kind of helps create more of an environmental portrait for your product. And I love this. I think this looks fantastic for a lot of products. You know, like the dog cologne, or literally, like if you have a pretty bathroom space, it could be set up right there. I mean, you can, this could be a situation where you may want to use those lamps that we talked about to create a little bit more light in that sort of a situation. You're going to have to be a little bit more creative because your bathroom's probably not going to put you, you know, with side light from the window. But I think that sense of place is really fantastic for a lot of product photography. And then the idea of adding a sense of movement. So when we say movement, it could be something like this, where this product is only halfway done and the needle is still in the thread. And so it really adds that element of humanity and touch to it, because we know that somebody's working on this product. So I love these two pieces together, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And especially for Instagram, you can create posts where you have multiple images layered on top of each other for the same post. And so you can try different techniques and put them all together in one post. And I believe that's how these were. They were one post together. And so we saw the finished product, and then we saw the product when it was still in process. And then this is similar. So we have the idea of the sense of place for the kitchen here on the bottom, and then the feeling of movement as far as literally pouring the sauce over the food, which is another fantastic tool when it comes to food photography, because you have the ability to have somebody holding the fork or pouring the sauce, or you know, stirring in the pot, or whatever it is that you want to tell in your story. Food really can be so hands-on, so it's fun to add that human element to it. And I feel like I'm gonna have to rush, so I'm just gonna, so just stop me if you need me to stop. But and so kind of going along that line, the including life and the sense of movement here is a similar sort of example where somebody's holding their products. And I love that. Like, I love when I see products that that where there are humans involved in the pictures, because I feel like it makes it more relatable to me as the consumer. I can look at that and I can imagine myself with that product. And so, and then of course the painting, she's holding the painting kits, and then the painting, there's an example of one that's just halfway done. So it adds that sense of movement also, and life. And then, like I mentioned before, using multiple images with various shot types to tell your story. So you could scoot back and create that portrait of somebody using your product, but then also more of a detail shot of the product itself, sort of your product headshot like these are. She's got that repeating idea like we talked about. And then using layers and texture to add depth and interest to your photograph. So here are two separate, we have on the left, we have the upright photography like we talked about. And so they added lots of layers in the foreground to add that depth to the picture. And then the other image, they also have lots of layers. So this is an example. Somebody mentioned something that's pretty flat. Now these little tarts are probably not very tall, but when they're layered on top of books, and then they added the little cotton balls, or I don't know what those are called, but, and then the textured, all of that together adds that interest and depth to the image. So, and of course they really paid attention to the colors in this image. They really used a lot of repeating neutrals with the mustardy browns and a little bit of green all through that. So all of it really works together to create that cohesive story for the image. So brand alignment in product photography. So I think it's a good idea to kind of boil down, I'm sure boil down is probably not the right term to use, but to choose 3 keywords that help describe your brand or your products or your business, and try to be really specifically intentional about using props and backdrops that help reflect those keywords. And like I mentioned at the bottom, color and lighting and editing choices can help reflect your company's look also. So you may feel more naturally drawn to kind of dark and moody, like we saw a second ago, these little tarts or whatever these things are, sort of a more dark and moody sort of image. And personally, that's kind of where I lean also. So, but maybe you're super bright and clean, or neutral and airy, or maybe your product is really a green natural product. And so you want to really reinforce that with specific intentional props that you're using throughout your photography. And consider a theme or one particular backdrop or one color to subtly thread through your images. It doesn't have to be every single picture has, you know, the same in color green, or every single picture has exactly the same backdrop. But I think if you're using it for a lot of images, it becomes part of your look, and it helps create that cohesion, which is really nice. And it's also really helpful when you're scrolling through Instagram, because people look at your picture and they can instantly tell that that it's yours because it has your look to it. So, and then I always recommend to keep editing consistent and simple. Keep it consistent for that cohesion, because you want your feed to look like it's yours. And then keep it simple for timelessness. When you're using lots of filters and things, those can tend to look dated really quickly. And so I always recommend letting your product shine and keeping your editing as simple as you can.
A little bit in just real quick, Nikki, about color and shading, and you're talking about this from a just kind of the mood that you're setting as well. And there was a question about like the right shade of color. So, you know, sometimes, you know, I've looked at pictures and I've been like, that's not a green chair, that's a blue chair. Or, you know, so quote unquote real colors. Also, you know, the different filters and things that you can put on that. How does that come across? And I know that you only have a few minutes left, but I just want to make sure that we get all of the questions answered.
Absolutely. I'm not totally sure that I know exactly what the question is, but I think that when you're using filters, it can really make it confusing for your viewer to know. Like you mentioned, you don't want to order a bracelet that looks red, but then you get it and it's really pink. like nobody wants that to happen. So I think that's really where that simple editing comes into place, and creating an environment where you're not having color casting from your shirt or your walls or even your props. I mean, if you're shooting something like jewelry or things that are really shiny, you want to really be cognizant of using props that are not going to cast colors onto those items. So I think that, you know, you want your products to shine both in color and, you know, just in general. And so I think that trying to reduce those color casts as much as you can, and using that nice natural sunlight and or super neutral bulbs will help with that. So we're going to just super quick, we're running out of time, but we're going to really quick pop over to the Freckled Hen Farmhouse. Does everybody see that Instagram feed? And I just wanted to show you some examples of some of her images. So when her images pop up onto my Instagram feed, I automatically know.
Nikki, I'm not sure that it's showing up for
everybody.
Is
it not? Okay.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay.
I'll try one more time.
I thought I saw it pop up and then it went to gray.
Yeah. We love technology.
I know. Can you see this screen again? My black screen? Yes.
Yep, we can see that one. Yeah, that's there.
Okay, well, I'll try it one more time, and then if not, I'll just send you there when you're done. When we're done. Is it showing up now?
No, we just see your presentation.
I think I need to reshare it. Let's try that.
Okay. There it is.
Okay, good. Okay. So this is Natalie Freeman's shop here in town. The name of her shop is the Freckled Hen Farmhouse, and she is fantastic at product photography. I think she takes a lot of her images herself, and I think she also has a photographer that helps her with some of them. But when I see her feed, her pictures come up on my feed, I know exactly that they're hers. So her brand cohesion is there. Like, there is no doubt in my mind that I know that this is a Freckled Hen Farmhouse picture. Some of the things that she does super well is that she uses a lot of repeats in her images. She wants you to know exactly what her products are that are for sale, and she's going to show you a lot of them. So she has lots of abundance that shows up in her images. She uses a lot of props, like this example here with the sprays and then the product bags. She puts products together that make logical sense. So she uses a lot of her products as her props. But I mean, if you can do that, then that's great, because then you're showing both more than one product at once, right? Here's an example of these little Christmas tree houses. These little Christmas houses are, you know, we have that triangle idea with the groups of 3. She uses a lot of hands and human contact in a lot of her images, which I think is fantastic, because in her, you know, she's selling home in her shop. And so she wants you to be able to really picture yourself with her products. This example, this little book that's on the right that says Being Beautiful, I think is a fantastic example of her pulling from the cover of the book ideas for props. So she, you know, she has, I don't know what that little thing is called, but I think you light it and like walk around your house with it, but it's, you know, dried flowers. And so she's taking the idea of the flowers that are on the image of the book and using those as another prop for her product. And so she kind of goes back and forth between upright images, and then she does a lot of flat lays also. So she's a fantastic resource for you to check out. I won't talk anymore about her because we're running out of time, but then I also wanted to show you another one. And this is the one that I mentioned before, Book, Cook, Look. Book, Cook, Look. And this is Holly Burfield. She is a photographer, so she does have that advantage. This is what she does. However, she is a voracious reader. And so she writes these reviews of books that she reads, and then she cooks from the book. So she'll take a recipe or a dish that's mentioned in the book and create these beautiful flat lays to go with her reviews. And a lot of them have been featured by the authors themselves. I mean, they've become really popular, but she's fantastic at, one of the things that she's great at is that she pulls color from the book cover and uses that color in her props that she's using. All of her, of course, she's cooking. So all of her, you know, products, the food that she's making, she can break all those down into ingredients, like we mentioned. Her setup, of course, is extremely consistent. I mean, it's obviously, I know when one of her pictures shows up in my feed because it's set up exactly the way they all are, which isn't probably what you would want to do in general, but if you were selling something, unless you happen to be a book publisher, then this is fantastic. But one thing that she uses, if you notice, if you look at her feed, you can see that her backdrop is exactly the same every time. So even though she covers it up in a lot of pictures, it's the same exact backdrop, I think, every single time.
Nikki, I'm just going to interject really quick just because we're at time, but we're not going to cut you off because I just want to let everybody know. I know we've had a couple of people that have had to go, but we want to let you know that this video recording and Nikki's presentation will be sent to you via email because you checked in with Julie. So thank you for doing that. Please stay because we will continue recording and continue to be here to answer questions and finish this up with Nikki. I just wanted to let you all know that the video will be sent to you. So you're not going to miss a thing. But if you can stay and continue to ask questions, we will stay and continue to take questions. So I just want to let everybody know that.
Great, thanks. So this is one example I wanted to show you. This book here on the left, The Sun Does Shine. This was an example of using harsh light. So she used that light creatively in the light and the shadows to, obviously the name of the book is The Sun Does Shine. And so she decided to use that harsh light. And when you can do it and you can make sure that that harsh light, the highlights aren't being blown out, it can look really fun and interesting, especially for, I think it would be really helpful for, somebody mentioned the silk fabric. I think that with that silk fabric, if you look through a lot of these, both Natalie's and Holly's, you'll see a lot of fabric that they're using and creating those folds and waves in the fabric. You may have to be creative. You may have to use something like small little pieces of cotton underneath or something to really keep the folds full with silk, because I think silk will, is naturally going to feel more flat when it lays down, but you can kind of create that movement and that depth to your image, to the silk, by creating those folds and that sort of a thing. And if you look through these two accounts specifically, you're going to see a lot of use of fabric and that sort of a thing to give you ideas as far as layering goes. So we'll go ahead and pop out of there for now. And we'll go back over here. Maybe, there we go. Okay. So specialized product photography, real estate or large installed products. So this is
Nikki, you're still stuck on your Instagram.
I forgot to reshare. Yes.
Yeah.
I forgot to reshare. Here we go. There we go.
The joys.
Thank you. I know. Are we back on that now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. All right. So this is a really specific field of photography. And in this photography field, you really are going to want to use a tripod because you're going to want to slow down your shutter speed. And these are things that we have not talked about. But you can use specific camera apps on your phone to allow you to adjust your shutter speed, because that's going to allow you to let in more ambient light. And you're going to need that tripod because when you have a slow shutter speed, any kind of movement of your hands is going to cause blur. So you're going to want to use a tripod and slow down that shutter speed to let in as much light as you can, because you're going to want to turn off all those inside lights, or at least only use the ones that are not going to cast that mixed lighting on your situation. And then you want to create, we love to have things in focus and lots of blur behind. You want to do that and install product like cabinetry or like large sculptures or things like that, unless you're taking a detail shot to go along with a large image of your photo of your product. You're going to want to use as much depth of field as you can. And so when you're shooting with a smartphone, if you're just shooting in auto mode, that's going to typically do that for you. But you may also need to use that tripod because you want to slow your shutter speed down. It kind of depends on what your light is like in that situation. And you, for product photography or for real estate photography, you're going to want to use a wide angle lens, but not too wide, because if you get a really wide angle lens, it starts to cause your lines to curve on the edges and it looks really distorted, which is not what you want. And I think it can also frustrate the people who come see those houses because those rooms are not that big. And that wide angle photography really makes them look unusually large. But and then color management is important. You want to watch for that mixed lighting, and you can correct some of it in editing, but try to get it as close to perfect in camera as you can. So and then editing, like we talked about, keeping that editing clean and simple and let your product shine. The temperature of your scene, the window light tends to cool out a little bit. So you're going to see an example in just a second, but I usually warm up my window light photographs just the tiniest bit when I'm editing, and come to the December workshop and we'll talk a lot about that. But and I tend to bump up contrast and vibrance just slightly, but I want to maintain the integrity of what my product looks like. And then I lift shadows a little bit also, and I try to reduce any glare or harsh highlights. And you can do some of that. And the app that I highly recommend that we're going to be talking about in the next workshop is the Lightroom mobile app. It's fantastic. It's super powerful, really intuitive and easy to use. So that's the app that we're going to talk about next time in our editing workshop. So here is the photograph on the left is the one with the backdrop, or with the I lost my train of thought, with the reflector on it. But then on the right hand side, all I did was I warmed it up slightly, so it changed the backdrop from looking like a cool gray to more of a neutral white color. And then I boosted my vibrance just slightly to boost my colors a little bit, and I lifted the shadows so you can see the shadow difference, especially on the yellow pineapple from the left to the right. Just a tiny bit of editing made a huge difference on that. So and then finally, a recommendation that I have that I think is fantastic. Sometimes it can get really difficult to think of ideas for your photography. And there is a Skillshare class called Create and Captivate in 30 Days of Engaging Instagram Photography Prompts for Makers and Artists. Some of them get a little bit geared towards like Etsy sellers. So that may be you or it may not be you, but you can kind of pick and choose and go through, because she gives really fun prompts for just giving you more ideas. Sometimes it can feel really dry trying to think of new ways to shoot your products. And so that's a fun little class that you can take. And then I always recommend to take time to intentionally, proactively practice, because if you are always feeling like you're behind and it's Thursday and you really want to get a post up on Thursday, but you don't have any pictures to take, then you're just going to feel frantic. But if you take 5 or 10 minutes, when you have a minute to intentionally and proactively practice, and when I say intentionally, I mean try something new, try a different composition that you've never tried, or move your body in a different way, get over the top or get down low, experiment with different types of layering and props and things like that. And then what you'll do is you'll create a portfolio that you'll have, that when you do want to post something on a Thursday and you don't have any products to shoot that day, you can pull from that portfolio that you have in your phone and use one of those images that you've already taken for those posts. So it's really helpful to have that portfolio of varied images that are creative, but still have your your one or two ideas or colors or backgrounds, and you've really intentionally and purposefully chosen your props to really reinforce your brand alignment. So when you have that kind of portfolio, it makes it really helpful and freeing when you are planning your Instagram or other social media posts. So that's all I have for today.
That's it. Not at all. Well, we thank you all very, very much for sticking with us. I do want to reiterate and remind that we will be sending you an email with this video and this presentation. We got an inquiry about some of your previous work with us, Nikki, and if they could have access to that, we will inquire about that. And if there is a way to get that to you, we will go ahead and include that in that email that's coming to you a little bit later. So because we know that Nikki has a lot of good content. The great news also is that we're learning as we're going and doing this. And so we are learning about what's in demand, what you need to know. And Nikki's going to stick with us for a while. And so she will be back again without a doubt. For a full listing of our programs and her future programs, she mentioned December 1st. We also are going to have a conversation with her, which will be a little more intimate for you to ask your specific questions on November 17th. It's a lunch break, so that'll be great. But you can find all of that at sbtdc.uark.edu. You can also click that little QR code and sign up for notifications or become a client. We're also posting on social media. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and stay in touch with us because we are looking forward to seeing you all next time. So thank you all again for being here. We really, really appreciate you. Have a great one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.